When you watch the mainstream media news, do you feel a little twitch? Is there a tingle in your left hand? Is your jaw locked? We have the solution. Welcome to Reasonable Arguments, the podcast where thoughtful debate meets unfiltered fun. Coming to you from Sarasota, Florida, where your hosts, Jamie Miller and Jennifer Bash, make sense of the chaos. Together, we mix informed conservative commentary, playful banter, and just the right amount of nonsense to keep it entertaining. This is Reasonable Arguments, and now your hosts, husband and wife duo, Jamie and Jennifer.
Hi.
Great intro, babe.
Yeah, happy Sunday. All right, so here we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories tonight, which you know are one of my favorite things.
I do, and I'm excited and apprehensive.
Okay.
About the topics.
Okay.
I have no idea.
All right, so what we do is we break down political news so it's easily digestible, and so I can understand, right? I'm learning through this. So today we are diving into Kash Patel. He is the new, he's Trump's new FBI director, and his mission is to expose the deep state. So what is this deep state? We're going to find that out. And what conspiracy theories are tied to it? We're going to find that out. So let's talk a little bit about Kash and who he is. So we know that he's the new FBI director for Trump, and that he has made it his mission to uncover deep state corruption. He previously served as a National Security Council official, a counterterrorism prosecutor, and a key aide in the Trump administration. He was involved in investigating the FBI's handling of the Russia probe, which made him a controversial figure. He wants to declassify documents related to JFK, 9/11, Epstein, and other conspiracies. And his appointment is controversial because some see him as a truth seeker and others as a political pawn. So the first question to you is, why are many Democrats concerned about Kash Patel in this role, and what risks do they see?
Well, I wouldn't call him a political pawn. I think he's a political disruptor, and Democrats should be concerned because they have systematically, going back to the Obama administration, weaponized government agencies. And Elon Musk, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel have all said they're bringing transparency. Probably the most, 1 month in, this is the most transparent presidential administration has been in modern history. So if people have not done anything wrong, or they have not manipulated government to attack their political opponents, they should have nothing to worry about. But those who have, they probably should.
So conservatives argue that the deep state has been undermining Trump and the Americas and America for years. So does Kash Patel finally give them an ally in exposing it?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure we define what the deep state is, because we like to use these terms, and most people use them loosely and broadly. And I don't know that that's fair, because there are people like myself who have been involved in politics for 30 years who've been called rhino or establishment. I don't know that anybody's called me deep state, but you're just one step away when you've been involved as long as I have, right?
We'll have to Google that. Jamie Miller, deep state.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, somebody already has probably. And so, but there are good government employees who've been involved for a long time. And so I think we have to define deep state, or how I define deep state is someone who is elected or unelected, appointed, hired, who makes decisions that impact negatively the American people while enriching themselves, or in one way or another, whether that's financial or whether that's power, whatever that is. And so they're making decisions. Somebody who's making deep state decision is putting Americans at risk to benefit themselves. And that, to me, is probably where we need to start the conversation. I'd love to hear in the comments and read the comments of what other people, how they define deep state, because I think it is a broad term. And when we're talking about this as a major domestic policy, dismantling the deep state, I think we need to start with how we define that.
Okay. So when I asked AI, what deep state means,
Okay.
or what it is. The deep state is a supposed network of unelected officials, intelligence agencies, corporations, and elites controlling policy behind the scenes. Some dismiss it as paranoia. Others believe it influences elections, wars, and financial systems. Patel wants to reveal its hidden influence. So both major parties have been linked to the deep state's activities. Democratic links are some point to JFK assassinations, the Obama administration surveillance expansion, and ties to intelligence agencies. The Republican links are the Bush administration's roles in the post 9/11 policies, the CIA's involvement in foreign interventions, and Trump's battles with intelligence agencies. Fuel claims that deep state influence exists across both party lines. So is the idea of a deep state just an excuse for certain politicians to dodge accountability, or is there legitimacy to these concerns?
Well, I think there's definitely legitimacy to the concerns. That certainly is a broader definition than what I just presented, because we've seen already in the resistance of bureaucracy against Donald Trump, mid-level or even low-level government employees saying they are not going to enact Trump's policies. So under that definition, that low-level employee,
The governor of Maine.
What's that?
The governor of Maine.
Well, yeah, the governor of Maine, but we're even talking about low-level people within, the Department of Agriculture or USAID, who just we're not going to implement Donald Trump's policies. Well, you're an employee, and so employees who don't implement the CEO's policies get fired. And so that's where they're at. And so that is a broader term, and that may be a correct term as well, because people get government jobs and they see them as lifetime appointments, and they're not. And I wrote in the blog in Substack, Reasonable Arguments, that we have, when a corporation lays people off, they almost inevitably, and I had show data to back it up, inevitably end up at laying off 18.5% of their employees. And we're not even close to that. Elon Musk is not close to that. Doge isn't close to that. They're like, oh, we had massive layoffs we're going to have massive layoffs at the Department of Defense. We're going to have 8 to 10% of administrative employees, not even all employees, just administrative employees. And so, I think there's a lot of people who are blowing this way out of proportion to, for political purposes as far as the layoffs go. You had about 4 questions in there. I maybe answered 1 or 2. So
the next question would be, many conservatives argue that the FBI, the CIA, and media are part of a larger scheme to control public opinion. Do we have any proof of this?
So yeah, big corporations, big, powerful, defense contractors, all, money talks, right? And so, it's been said many times that, money is the mother's milk of politics. And
never heard it.
Of course, I might want to Google that real quick. But it's been out there for, let's say, 100 years,
oh,
right?
Okay.
That money is what keeps the gears greased, so to speak, in politics and government. And so, one thing that we've, that happens is because big corporations, they influence, popular culture. Whether that's through advertising, whether that's through the TV shows that are written, advertisers have a big say in what is said and who are the actors on TV shows. And so a lot of those things, whether that TV show is DEI or not, is driven largely by, advertisers, by big corporations. And so that then permeates popular culture. And so is that deep state, or is that just a corporation trying to make more money? And so, is that the chicken or the egg? Certainly the military complex. But on the Democrat side, you could say the environmental, protection complex, right? There's a huge, the solar energy complex that was a big push under Barack Obama. And we ended up spending $5 billion and no solar panels. And so where did $5 billion go? I mean, there's lots of conspiracy theories of what we have enough facts to know that there's probably a conspiracy somewhere.
Yeah.
We don't, then the theory is we can all speculate, right? And so hopefully the transparency we see out of Patel and Bondi and others will clarify some of that.
Okay. Many conservatives, I already did that one. If the deep state exists, how can the average person see its effects in everyday life?
I think you see it through advertising. I think you see it through television. You certainly see it through, if it exists and exists on both sides. I think if it exists on both sides. And you have a disruptor like Donald Trump. Both sides will try to wait him out, right? Like we know that if you want to call it the deep state of Congress, Nancy Pelosi illegally impeached the president of the United States in his first term, knowing that the information she was acting on was false. She knew that information was false, and she decided to act anyway. And so to impeach the president, you want to talk about overthrowing the government, that's an attempt to overthrow the government. And, but if it exists, people could see it in the stock market. Certainly, gas prices, food prices, things like that people see every day.
Okay. So the first conspiracy that we're going to talk about is the 9/11. And this is one that you and I have had many conversations about because I truly believe that this was set up by our government. And I don't think that you do, because you lost somebody in 9/11. And so it's definitely a question. So obviously, some believe that 9/11 was an inside job or allowed it to happen for war profits. So let's talk about the different areas. So Twin Towers. Theories include controlled demolition, the presence of thermite, and free fall collapse speeds. There's no doubt planes hit it, but there was other things that were happening in the floors below that made them fall completely down. The Pentagon, some claim that damage does not match a Boeing 757 impact, and surveillance footage is limited. If a plane didn't hit it, where did it go? Where did that plane go? And every video that I've seen with the Pentagon literally looks like a missile hitting it, not a plane.
Well, that's the argument is that it's coming in so low and horizontal, right? But every plane lands low and horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
So you maybe had a more experienced pilot there. I did lose somebody in the plane on the Pentagon, a colleague from the recount, and I have no doubt that she died in a plane that hit the Pentagon.
Okay. Flight 93 officially crashed due to passenger resistance, but some suggest it was shot down by the military. I 100% believe that it was shot down by the military. Not that those people weren't heroes in trying to take the plane down, but that's what I truly believe.
I don't know that argument's relevant one way or the other. There's no question that passengers on Flight 93 banded together to try to take the flight down. If the call had to be made where our military personnel were ordered to take down a commercial flight, and I think they were given green lights to do that. I don't know if that's unclassified or not, but my guess is that it was. And when they say there's still a fourth plane out there and it's coming to hit the Capitol or the White House, and I knew people in the White House and the Capitol that day who evacuated. And, obviously there's real fear, knowing that two planes had hit the World Trade Center, each World Trade Center tower and the Pentagon. And so, so if in fact our military was given that order, I feel really horrible for the pilot if that is in fact the case. But there's no question that those people on that flight were heroes. They made the conscious decision to sacrifice themselves.
Right.
And so I don't think, regardless of what comes out there, that doesn't change the fact that the people on that flight had banded together and decided to put our country ahead of their own lives.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one for 9/11 was Larry Silverstein. So Larry Silverstein's, who was the leaseholder for the World Trade Centers, the Twin Towers, he had purchased a lease insurance policy on the World Trade Center just months before 9/11, and took out, he purchased a lease. I'm sorry, purchased a lease for the World Trade Center just months before 9/11, and took out an insurance policy that specifically covered terrorist attacks. And after the tax, he received a payout of $4.5 billion.
So did the insurance policy only cover terrorist attacks, or was it a rider that included terrorist attacks?
I don't know that. I'm sure we're going to find that out. But it definitely it was specific to terrorist attacks. That was part of it. So the question is now, my question really is, and you're not going to know this, but what I'm bringing up tonight is, where did the money go? So the new towers were partially funded by approximately $1 billion of the insurance money. The state of New York provided an additional $250 million, and the Port Authority agreed to contribute $1 billion. So this leaves the question of, where did the other $3.55 billion
to rebuild
Silverstein received
to rebuild the World Trade Centers was only $2.5 billion?
That's
okay.
That's being reported. Yeah.
Okay. So that seems low, I guess, to me, but but I guess that's probably where it lands. So you're saying that he had insurance, and you think that that somehow he was involved with the takedown of the World Trade Centers.
And we also know, because we watched a YouTube of her name was and her name just completely went out of my mind, but I'll get it. So, but she worked for the CIA.
Yeah, I've not done enough research on that person to mention her or
Susan Lindauer. Susan Lindauer, and she was part of this. She knew, because of her department, that these attacks were being planned as early as June in 2001 or whatever this was. And
there's no question that the attacks were planned probably way longer than June of 2001.
But we knew about it.
We may have known about it. But if this is another thing of unclassifying information. How many attacks of things do we know about? How many turn out to be true and we stop them? And how many do they run down and they end up not being true? And so, the question becomes, if you knew that the people were going to hijack planes, was there some level of protection that could have come in to ensure that didn't happen, locking the pilot doors, for instance?
Well, that's a whole different thing, because the pilots aren't necessarily who they say they are, and we'll get into that later here too. But I'll put the link to the Susan Lindauer's video, because she specifically says that she had reached out to many, many people, and because she was actually put under the Patriot Act for coming forward and being a whistleblower, she actually has thousands of hours of conversations between her and people in Congress, telling them of these things that were going to happen. Her boss walked away with $14 million after this happened, and he was the head of the CIA. So I'll link that, and that's a whole different discussion.
I think I watched most of that video, and I questioned her credibility. So, I'm not saying she's not credible. I've never heard of her before you asked me to watch this video, which was extremely boring. But if I'd love to hear what other people think, to be honest with you.
Then let me ask this question.
Put the link in there, and I'd love to hear what other people think about it. But I think I even said to you something like, wow, this is, I've heard this story from, tens or dozens of people, maybe not about 9/11, but about something. And it's just, I'm not sure, through my career, you run across people, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I try to take everybody at face value. I'll take her at face value.
Okay. Can I ask this question now?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do people believe government incompetence rather than conspiracy that explains 9/11 failures? Because that's what it would be. If they knew that this was happening, which I think there's documented proof that they knew that this was happening, how are they okay with government incompetence then?
Well, I agree with you. We were in the switch of a president. George W. was inaugurated in January of 2001. This happens less than 9 months later. I'm not saying that he's not responsible, because He's the president of the United States, right?
And a son of the president, of a president.
And the son of a president. And so, and that also, is one of the conspiracies, is that, the father had this discrepancy with Saddam Hussein.
Are you taking my stuff?
I don't know your stuff. So should I wait on that? I'll wait on that. I guess we're going to get to that later. And so, yeah, so I'm not trying to say that he wasn't responsible, but I could say that, we see this now. We're 1 month in for Donald Trump. Kash Patel, the FBI director, a pretty important position, was just confirmed, right? So, there is a level of, hey, I don't care who you are. Everyone's like, oh, you should be, somehow having the experience of running a government agency to run a government agency. But there's very few people who've run the FBI, or I think Kash Patel.
It's a little different than president, though.
I think Kash Patel's maybe the 9th person to run the FBI. So
but that's are you saying that in the same way as someone becoming president and not knowing 9 months later?
I'm saying there's a lot of information you have to take in, and there's a lot of information that you have to discern of what is true and what is not. And was there? I could see that in the George W. administration, or especially George W. had especially in 2001, had a level of bravado, right? Of course, they're not going to attack the United States. They know what's coming, right? And so I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that it could have been that. Is it incompetence? Well, maybe if bravado's incompetence, maybe. But was it a conspiracy theory? Maybe that is. Maybe there were charges in the World Trade Center, and this guy who has the lease out or the insurance for $4.5 billion blew it up. Who knows? I mean, I don't know that I know any more than anyone else. So I'm not trying to say somebody's right or somebody's wrong. But the lady that I saw on the YouTube, I questioned her credibility.
Of course. But okay, so what role did intelligence failures play in allowing the attacks to happen? And was it intentional?
Well, do we know the intelligence failures, right? And that's one of those things that we kind of kicked it off. Is like, how much should the government keep from people, and for how long? Let's say with the JFK assassination. So now, if JFK is going to last 60 years, well, are we going to have 9/11? Wait till 60 years before we know the full truth? I don't know.
I think we're going to find it out in the next 4 years. For sure.
I would rather find it out, because I think people need to know, whether their government is undermining their ability to have freedom.
Right. Okay. So if there was a cover up, what would be the government's motive for hiding the truth?
There's lots of motives, whether it's as simple as getting reelected by George W. Bush, or whether it's money going to different places, or, the worst of conspiracy theories is that, Dick Cheney was behind it, and it was to start a war so that he could enrich himself, so I don't know that any of those things are true. I have no personal knowledge that any of those things are true, but that would be, worst case scenarios as far as I'm concerned. If somebody like the vice president had knowledge or was responsible for it and covered it up to send young men to war and enrich himself.
Okay. So the next one we're going to talk about is Jeffrey Epstein. And the
you made a jump there.
and the blackmail networks. So we know that Epstein was involved in an elite sex trafficking ring. Some believe he was working for intelligence agencies to blackmail politicians and celebrities. And his mysterious death also still raises major red flags, because he was, killed in prison.
He
died in prison.
He hanged, yeah.
He died in prison. So what do we know for sure about Epstein's connections to powerful people? So we know
for sure that he was very connected to powerful people on both sides of the aisle, and the Hollywood elite.
So we have pictures. Does that necessarily mean that people were involved? I mean, it's like a Diddy thing.
Well,
right?
It's like any politician. I have pictures with politicians who don't know my name, right? Does that mean that they carry every blight that I have with me into their future? No, it shouldn't. But a lot of wealthy people get a lot of pictures, at fundraisers. I got a fundraiser, and you've been there, despite your lack of politics, you've been through a couple of grip and grin photo lines. Speaker McCarthy was one of them. I think that conversation lasted 8 words, right? So we have a picture with McCarthy. Does that make us good or bad does that make him worse because he knows us, or us worse because we know him? Okay. Right? So, just because there's a picture, the pictures I've seen appear to be in public places, not even private homes, like private party homes. They seem to be in public places or public type events, fundraising type events. There's certainly more to the story because,
Okay, well, that leads me into my next question. So is it possible that Epstein was working with intelligence agencies to control elites?
It's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. Is it probable? I don't know. Was he just what was Epstein's? I don't know that we'll ever know Epstein's motivation. Hopefully we find a money trail somewhere that kind of says, maybe somebody was paying him for X, Y, or Z, and that would enlighten some of us on how, deep the corruption goes in our government and Hollywood.
Okay. Why haven't we seen the full Epstein client list? And do you think that Patel
there's two
we know
things.
It's on their desk, on Pam's desk, right?
So there's 2 things. One, I go back to the Ashley Madison list, right? So there's, if in fact this is, all these folks all were in Epstein Island, all naked at the same time, squirting baby oil on each other, doing crazy things,
but the whole thing was with children. That's the whole.
Well,
that's the difference.
If people were if it was with children, they should be arrested and jailed. That there should be no statute of limitations. I don't know what the rules are on this island that exists off the coast or whatever, but those folks should be run out of town on a rail, and at the very least, and probably thrown in prison for the rest of their lives, if there's proof that people were having sex with children. I don't think there's just no quarter for that, just none, and I don't think the American people will accept that at all. And so now the question becomes, like Ashley Madison, which is not children. So let's take children out of it for the moment. There were, when you looked at the math when the Ashley Madison breach happened, and you had all of these folks, all these men who were on Ashley Madison, and you have a total of, I forget what I told you. It's a crazy stat. Like if you just say, okay, just men between the age of 20 and 60 in the United States, in America, were on the list. It's like 1 out of every 3 or 4 men were actively on Ashley Madison. It's an incredible, and so when that came out, there were reporters who said, oh, there's so-and-so's profile. There's all these politicians in Florida, especially, that I was aware of, not nationally, but that reporters would say, oh, they're on this. They had profiles and they're into X, Y, and Z. And reporters decided, it's their personal life and they're adults, and it turned out to be too many of them, right? Like there's just so many of them. And so what do? You take down the government through sex scandal? And, we didn't take down a president because of a sex scandal. And we didn't even take down a president for lying to Congress about a sex scandal. And so, and Bill Clinton. So if it doesn't include children, and it includes hundreds and thousands of very popular names, does the public say, wow, it just included everybody, and they shrug like they did? The public shrugged over Ashley Madison. And, because it was just so large, they couldn't consume it almost.
Totally different. I think you're comparing apples to oranges.
I could be, but I just, I think you're throwing in sex with children, which that certainly brings a level of
but that's what it is. It's sex
trafficking.
That's the whole thing.
So it brings in a level of criminal activity
Yeah.
Okay. Ashley Madison was not criminal activity. It was adults doing things outside their marriage. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so if people conducted criminal activity, I hope Pam Bondi does not release the list. I hope she just makes arrests, just starts arresting people if she has proof that they had sex with children. Why release the list? And I think that may be kind of what's going on internally is, hey, instead of releasing the list and having these folks go and protect themselves in the court of public opinion, let's go arrest them and charge them with having sex with underage children or trafficking or contributing to the trafficking of children across international lines. It's a crime. And so Pam Bondi is there to prosecute crimes. And so I hope that it is on her desk. I hope that if there's crimes that were committed by powerful people in Hollywood and Congress, that she does not release the list and just makes arrests.
So let's move on to JFK. So the questions are, was JFK assassinated by a lone gunman or a larger conspiracy? Theories involve the CIA, mafia, military industrial complex, and the LBJ. Recently uncovered files suggest intelligence involvement. So why is the U.S. government still withholding JFK documents?
No idea. It likely has to do with the nature of, some of the information. The one thing that brings me some satisfaction is Pam Bondi said, I've looked at it and there's nothing there that's going to surprise anybody. And, the one thing I know about Pam from knowing her for 15 years is that she's an honest operator, and I'll take her at her word until something proves me wrong. Now, of course, everybody wants to see it. And, we've all seen the film of him moving forward and then it looks like he gets shot backwards, shot from the front. And it's certainly, all of that, the Jack Ruby killing Lee Harvey Oswald, all of it just leads into this more conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
And so, it was Ruby paid? Was Ruby's family paid? He was supposedly mobbed up, which always kind of led to, the speculation right after was that it was the mob that killed JFK, and then Lee Harvey Oswald had these ties to Russia, and so it just, and my conspiracy is that Russia's been infiltrating our colleges and elections since the 60s. And so it would not surprise me if it's, all goes back to the Russians.
Okay. Was JFK's assassination a way for the deep state to remove a president who threatened their power?
I don't think so, because we all know now that JFK was sneaking Marilyn Monroe and others into his residence, and to take down his presidency, all they had to do was release that information. They didn't have to kill him. And, in 1964, 65, whatever year he was assassinated, that was seen as not conduct of a president,
Mm-hmm.
And so if that had become public, that would have ended his presidency.
Okay. So some of the other deep state theories is the military industrial complex, perpetual wars for profit, big pharma and COVID-19, population control versus public health, UFOs, secrecy, government hiding alien technology, and election fraud, your 2020 election conspiracies. So are some of these just distractions used to manipulate voters?
So yeah, you threw a lot out there. So I guess I won't discuss them in particular, but are they distractions to manipulate voters? I think that at times they become distractions so people will avoid seeing what may be happening, whether it's internationally or whatever, And so, for instance, there was an election in Germany and they just elected a conservative coalition government. And, what does that mean? And, do people care about it? And I know you don't. but that could have a major impact on how Europe moves forward with the war in Ukraine and Russia, and how Europe, coalesces behind the third largest economy in the world in Germany. And, so that Germany still has a huge economic influence over the EU. And do they, how does that impact the United States when you have the new German, I think it's chancellor, not prime minister, the German chancellor say things like, well, we're going to kind of be an anti-Trump, so we'll see.
Are intelligence agencies actively working to suppress conservatives?
There's no question. It'll depend. Like, there's no question that Obama weaponized government, and that had to include the intelligence agencies. And maybe for the first time in our history, we'll prove that we were using our intelligence agencies against the American people. I hope not. But my suspicion is we know for a fact that Obama overtly used the IRS to weaponize against conservative groups and people. And so my speculation is that we will find out more, that there are more ways in which Obama and then Biden weaponize these agencies against conservatives.
Okay. How do we separate legitimate concerns from conspiracy rabbit holes?
I think it's important to say that, hey, these are concerns, regardless of whether the conspiracy is true or not. And so I think sometimes, for instance, there was another round from Maricopa County. The sheriff had a press conference a week ago about Barack Obama's birth certificate. Now, my speculation is that Barack Obama was likely born in Hawaii, but he maybe was born, he may be 3 years older than what he claims, because he wanted to ensure that there wasn't any conflict, and that he was born after Hawaii was a state, and he may have been born in Hawaii prior to it becoming a state, right? So like, it could be just that. But everybody's made it into this huge, much bigger theory of, I have my birth certificate, you have yours. How does Barack Obama not have his birth certificate, right? And so, and then there's the confusion over the records and all that other stuff. So, but here we're still chasing that down. For what reason? Like, what does that prove? Okay, I guess it would prove he wasn't qualified to be president, but the truth of the matter is he was.
Yeah.
We're not going to go remove the appointees from his U.S. Supreme Court, because they were confirmed by the Senate, right? So that's why we have the balance of power. That's why we have the separation of government, the three branches of government. And my speculation is that he was probably born in Hawaii and may have been older than what he was, and so somebody changed the date on a birth certificate to make it ensure that he looked like he was born after Hawaii State. So why do we chase? Who cares at this point, right? And he became the president of the United States, and he's certainly, are we going to strip him of his rights as a former president? I mean, I guess we could. I don't know that that's good for the country, to take away his Secret Service detail and thing. He still served 8 years as president of the United States.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to know about, and not that this is something that you can answer, but something that I looked into, was, when I reading about the deep state and all of that, how are these people communicating? Is it like a secret door somewhere and a secret knock? Like, what is it? So what I found is that there are back channels and private networks. So officials and elites may use encrypted messagings like Signal, Proton Mail. And Signal is actually funny because this is the second time I've heard it. The first time I heard it was when the Department of Education board chief, or whatever his name is, was being recorded from a reporter being told that, Elon came in and Trump shut everything down, and his people were still talking through Signal. Proton Mail and secure satellite phones to communicate outside of channels, or outside of official channels. corporate and intelligence networks. So intelligence agencies and multinational corporations provide avenues for clandestine discussions protected under national security laws. Obviously, the secret meetings and organizations, groups like the Bilderberg Group, never heard of it, Council on Foreign Relations, and World Economic Forum allow high-level discussions between political and financial elites, and of course, media influence. So some believe deep state operatives control mainstream narratives by leveraging corporate media, ensuring that only approved information reaches the public. What are your final thoughts on all this?
Certainly those groups all get together and try to discuss things. So does the Sarasota County Republican Party. So does, all kinds of groups. The Dairy Association of America, right? They get together. What's best for us? And so do rich people do that with the Bilderberg Group? Yes, right? They get together. There's no doubt they do. And, do they then make decisions that influence the world? Yes, because they're powerful, rich people, and they can determine, hey, do we crush Bitcoin or do we, try to take advantage of it?
Yeah.
Right. So my guess is one of the conversations that's going on at this point.
Do not let him jump up here.
And so, Jennifer's done such a great job of getting our cameras and our microphones just right.
And this cat's going to ruin it.
And we had a little bit of a disaster in a previous taping of this episode where one of the cats jumped up here and knocked the cameras down. So I hope I answered that. So I don't think there's any question they get together. There's no question they communicate. Are they elected and unelected and hired government employees who are making decisions that affect and impact the freedom of Americans to line their own pockets? That's how I define the deep state. And, the answer to that is maybe.
Okay. All right. So that's obviously we're done with today. What we would like to know is whether you think it's a conspiracy or just government as usual. One thing's clear, that transparency matters for sure. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and let us know in the comments, which of the theories do you think has merit and which are pure fiction? So.
I'm excited to hear the comments, read the comments, and have discussions with people about it because, like I said, I don't know that anybody knows the answer on a lot of these things until the government, unless the Epstein things with Pam Bondi. We'll see, if they decide to and what they decide to release.
Okay. All right. So until next time. Bye.
Take us out, Jennifer.
This has been Reasonable Arguments, News and Nonsense. There is so much BS on the mainstream media news, but you knew that. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. See you next time as husband and wife duo